Hello everyone. My name is Elisa. Welcome to my channel. I hope you're all doing so good today. We are here to talk about my favorite books of 2025. Like everyone else on BookTube, this is probably my favorite video to film all year because I get to talk about books that I absolutely adored and hopefully get to put them on your radar or chat with you about them if you have also read them. So we have 12 books that we're going to talk about today. That was just the number that felt right this year. I do almost different numbers every year, and these 12 were the ones where I had initially started with 10, and then there were two that I just kept feeling like I needed to add them on. So I did, and we have a top 12 to talk about. I'm going to start with number 12, and then we will go all the way to number 1. I do want to preface, and I know so many people say this, but I'm going to say it this year. This ranking was incredibly hard to do, and I don't stand by it. I've done it like this for now, but I have waffled back and forth so many times on this. Normally, I actually feel pretty solid about my ranking. This year, I really don't. I don't know if it's just because there's so many things that feel really different and hard to compare to one another, but the ranking feels a little bit loosey-goosey, so just know that going in. But I would recommend any of these and would highly encourage you to pick them up if they sound at all interesting. So without further ado, we will get into all of these books. So starting off in number 12, we have Glorious Exploits by Ferdia Lennon. This is published by Henry Holt and Company, and this book really just needed to be on here because of how surprising of a read it was for me and how surprising that I loved it. I sort of bought this on a whim on sale because so many other people had done rave reviews of it, but I don't feel like I necessarily gravitate towards this type of historical fiction, and yet here we are. So let me tell you what it's about. So this novel is following sort of amidst the Peloponnesian War, but we're near the back end of it. We are following two Syracusans. They are potters, and they decide that they want to put on a production of Medea. And they have very differing reasons for wanting to do this. One of them is really in it for the love of the art. And then the other one is in it for the potential fame and glory and opportunities that might come if he can pull this production off. We get an interesting foil of them both, which I think is a fascinating part of this novel. And they decide that the best way to do this, because they're potters and really out of work potters, they have little to no money. So they decide that they're going to use the Athenian prisoners that are being held down at a quarry in order to put on the play. So they are going to be the actors and stagehands, etc. Big is leaving. That's totally fine. You do what you need to do, buddy. So that is the setup of this novel. What I love about this novel is the full breadth of emotions that it takes you on, and it really does show a wide scope and arc of humanity between all of the different characters, and then within each singular character's arc themselves. There is a lot of different relational dynamics going on with the prisoners, with two potters that are putting on the play, with other people that work in the town. And I feel like this book just realizes so well the human condition, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I loved it for that. I also really like how this book sort of forces the reader or confronts the reader into finding ways to relate to all of the characters, even when they're doing horrible things. And I think one of the ways the author does that is through the dialect. So it's written in an Irish dialect. Ferdia Lennon is Irish, which doesn't make any goddamn sense with what the book is talking about, right? These are not Irish people. And yet I feel like he creates this dissonance in the believability of the world almost to show that this could really be anyone. It sort of makes you question, is he conflating this with Irish conflict, the Troubles? And then if that's the case, you can sort of take these cognitive leaps and say well, if it could be them, maybe he's talking about anyone. And I think he really is. Everybody has within themselves the ability to do harm and the ability to do good. And I think we all do those to some degree. And this book really forces you to reckon with that. And I love this book for that. So it would definitely add to the voice of people that are saying this is fantastic. It really is. I again, don't feel like I like this type of historical fiction, but clearly this book has proven me wrong. So that is Glorious Exploits at number 12. At number 11, we have a poetry collection, and one that I read fairly recently. I read this in November. This is Hair on Fire. It's published by Two Lines Press. It's part of their Calico series, which is an anthology series that they release 2 of every year. Normally there's a poetry and a short story collection. This is poetry, like I said, and this one is 5 Afghan women who are writing about a variety of different things, but a lot of them are writing about living in a war-torn country, talking about the diaspora of Afghanistan, and that does kind of bleed throughout all of the poets, even though their styles are very different and even the subject matter is very different. I enjoyed all 5 of the poets included in this, and I feel like for an anthology collection that is a really impressive feat to like everything in here. And this is my favorite edition of the Calico series so far. It did come out in 2025, so it's one of their newer ones, and I absolutely adored it. If you like poetry and you're okay with some of the hard-hitting, violent, really sad content matter, I think this is definitely something that you should pick up. In addition to me just loving the poetry in this, these are just produced so well. They're really beautiful. So this is the title page. Every collection has like a certain color for the title pages of each poet. So this is what a single poet's title page will look like. And then with the poetry, they actually put the original language and the English language side by side, so you can see both of them. And not only is that just a cool feature to get to see what the original language would look like, it is also really useful in poetry in particular because you can sort of see the page breaks, the line spacing, the white space on the page, and with poetry that does matter a lot. So for example, you can see the last part of this poem. In English, it's much shorter, and in the original language, which is Persian, so all of these are translated from Persian, I should say, is much longer. And you can also see at the end, it gets very clipped compared to the longer phrases above. And I feel like that's just so useful to see with poetry. It gave me, you know, as good of an understanding as I can get without knowing the language of what the poet is potentially trying to do. So I just love this collection. So good. Would highly recommend. So that is Hair on Fire. Number 10, we have Boy Parts by Eliza Clark. This is published by HarperCollins. And this book, got me. This book I never want to read again. And I think it was such an intelligent novel saying so many important things, but do know this is very dark. Do check the trigger warnings, of which there are many in this book. It does not hold back any punches. I picked this one up because I read Penance, was it last year or the year before? I can't remember, and I loved that book. I think it's phenomenal. So I wanted to pick up her debut novel, which is Boy Parts, and this is also so good. We are following our main protagonist, who is incredibly narcissistic and just really lacks empathy, and it just is all around a pretty horrific person. And we see her interactions with all these different relationships she has, whether that be her family, her friends, her romantic interests, peers in her line of work. She's an artist, and how badly she treats all of them, and how the mistreatment of them varies depending on who they are to her and what she needs from them. And not only do I think the author really accurately portrayed these kind of like horrific relational dynamics, but also made all of the characters feel very distinct and very real. This author shows that like those characters also have their own flaws. She doesn't try to make them these like perfect victims in a way, although they are being victimized. They all have their own complex histories and personalities and reasons why they continue to choose to be in a relationship with someone that treats them poorly and even like brutally at times. This book also, I think, is tackling a lot of themes that are sort of underneath the surface, because this book is very plotty with all of that, all of those relationships going on in the background. But this book is talking about class and how that intersects with art. This book is talking about sexual assault, particularly sexual assault from a female perpetrator to a male victim, and the ways in which the patriarchy and sort of toxic masculinity prevent these men from even admitting that what they experienced is sexual abuse and sexual assault. And again, overall, while this book is really dark, I think it justifies the darkness and is really trying to get you to think about some of these systems that we have in place and how they harm everybody. And I just really thought it was such a smart book, and definitely get why so many people love this, because it's another really well-liked book the year that it came out. So that is Boy Parts by Eliza Clark. Number 9, we have the only other poetry collection on this list, and that is Things You May Find Hidden in My Ear by Mosab Abu Toha. This is published by City Lights Books. And this collection actually has a ton of similarities to Hair on Fire, because this collection is also about war. This really focuses on the devastation of the genocide in Gaza and what it's like to witness all of these horrific things happening around you, what it's like to see your home destroyed, and what it's like to long for a home that no longer exists. This author is Palestinian and is giving a really vulnerable, confronting personal view of what their experience has been like. And this is also horrific in a lot of ways, as you would expect it to be, but I think the poetry is so sharp and direct to reader, and I think it's very evocative and is just very beautifully written, in addition to being a sort of witness to all these atrocities that are going on around them. If you like this one or the other one, I think you will like the opposite. So if you already picked one up and enjoyed it, definitely pick up the other, or pick up both if you have not read either of them. So that is Things You May Find Hidden in My Ear. At number 8, that's where we are, we have a creative nonfiction work, and this is Self-Portrait in Green by Maria NDiaye. This is translated from the French by Jordan Stump and published by Two Lines Press. And this is the author's memoir of these green women, who are all women that have had a meaningful impact on her in some way and are all very subversive in different ways. And you sort of get that with the way that she talks about them. It's very surrealist in nature. And because you're not really sure, who are these green women? What are they? They don't feel like humans. It's all kind of mysterious and strange. And I think that really mirrors how, these women can't be pinned down. They're refusing to be what society or these people around them want them to be. And so we see them maybe as those people do, as these strange creatures where something feels off. And I think that was just so smartly done by the author. Not to mention the writing in this is just spectacular. It is some of the best writing I've read this year. In the vlog that I read it in, which I don't even remember what that was it my Two Lines Press publisher taste test? I think it was. I read out the first couple of paragraphs of that book just to give you a taste of the writing. And if you're interested in it, I would definitely recommend you check that out or look up a sample online. It is such beautiful, flowing, elegant writing, and I absolutely loved it. There are also pictures interspersed throughout this nonfiction work, and those are really interesting and mysterious as well. It is just really shrouded in mystique, and I didn't understand all of it, but what I understood I loved, and I was just there for the ride and the beauty of the prose. So if you are down for that sort of experience where you don't really know what's happening, I would encourage you to pick this up. It's really fantastic and another big surprise for me this year. So that is Self-Portrait in Green. Number 7, we have the only short story collection on this list. I thought about a couple others that were also amazing, but this is the only one that made it, and that is Sarahland by Sam Cohen. This is published by Grand Central Publishing, I believe. And this collection blew me away. It was so good. This has sort of been my year of returning to short story collections. Last year, I was really struggling to find any that I liked or could keep my interest the whole time. And this year, it's been a real return to form. This one, definitely the best one that I read. It is also very dark, so do look up trigger warnings before going into this. I'll give you a couple examples of the story so you can get an idea of what this is about, but I will say the through line of this collection, as the title might suggest, is that each collection involves some Sarah or multiple Sarahs in some capacity. Sometimes they are the protagonist of the story, or sometimes they are the subject of what's getting talked about in a story. The first story follows a group of Sarahs that are at college, and they have sort of formed this amalgamous clique, and they sort of have like a hive mind mentality, very much a la the Heathers. That's what I always compare it to. And one of the Sarahs really wants to be her own individual person. She thinks she can achieve that through this new relationship she has formed with another college student that is very independent, does not mind standing out, does not mind taking up space. And the Sarah that we're following is really gravitates towards that because it sort of embodies everything that she wants to be. So we follow how that relationship kind of unfolds and changes the Sarah. Very fascinating. The second story is about a Sarah who goes into sex work. She sort of gets recruited into sex work. She's living a very complacent, unfulfilled life, and she starts working there and finds not only this community, but finds that she is very skilled at a certain specialty. And the internal monologue that she has while discovering this about herself, in a lot of ways, it really is about finding purpose and confronting our own systems of belief. It's really interesting. And again, all of these are like very plotty. There's a lot going on top of some of the thinky parts underneath, and I just loved it. It's so, so good. And this, I did say at the time, and I still stand by this, is one of the best audiobooks that I have ever listened to. It is not a full production. It does not have multiple narrators. That's not why it's one of the best audiobooks I've ever listened to. It is simply because the audiobook narrator is so talented at bringing all of these different people to life. I could not believe the way she was able to modulate her voice and her tone and her cadence in order to feel like every character was different. She is so talented. I will put her name down below to give props where they are due, but would definitely encourage you to pick up the audiobook if you're interested in reading this one. So that is Sarahland. Coming in at number 6, we have one that I read near the beginning of the year, and that is Madwoman by Chelsea Bieker. I can't remember who publishes this. Let me look it up. This is her first Big 5 publishing. She was published by Catapult prior to this, so I can't quite remember. Little Brown and Company. And this book, oof, I loved. We are following our female protagonist who has a seemingly perfect life. She has a loving husband, 2 kids, a wonderful house. They're fairly well off, and she has a significant social media following where she shows all of this to the outside world. And our inciting incident to this novel is she makes a friend one day when she almost hits another woman with her car, and they hit it off. And as we start to see this friendship develop, us as the reader starts to realize that there is a barrier to emotional intimacy that is happening because the narrator has so many secrets about her life. And so we start to get those unfolding over time. And lies are a huge theme throughout this book, both big and small. And I thought it did a fascinating job of tackling the role that lies play in our life, particularly in women's lives. Not to say that only women lie, everybody lies, but we realize that there are a lot of big lies that our protagonist has not been honest about to almost everyone in her life, her husband included, her kids included, and those seem to be resurfacing in her life, and she's very concerned about that. Then we get all of these small lies that she's forced into almost as a woman. And it's all these ways in which the people around her and society at large want her to keep them happy, which is a role that a lot of women get forced into. There is such a funny line that I'll never forget where she has just had sex with her husband. It doesn't really show a lot of the sex, so don't be concerned about that if you don't like seeing sex in a novel. I don't even think it really shows anything, if I remember correctly. Her husband asked her afterwards, like, did she have a good time? And really, she didn't. It was just okay, but she doesn't want to say that to him because she knows it will turn into a larger conversation. So while her husband feels like he's being a good guy by asking her if she enjoyed himself, which maybe he does care about her enjoying herself, really you also know that underneath he's looking to be self-gratified, that he did a good job. And there is like ulterior motives to that question. And so she gets put in this position where she's like, well, either I lie and say it was really good and we can just move on from this because he'll get the ego hit that he needs, or I can tell the truth and then I have to get into this conversation about why it wasn't good enough for me. And so she lies. And there are times where she's at the post office and her children are sort of like causing a ruckus and you can see everyone around her judging her. And so she tries to like plaster this smile on her face to try and keep everyone around her calm and placate to them. And all these little lies add up. So I think it does such a smart job of saying like, yes, she is intentionally withholding large pieces of information from people. And also like, look at all the ways that other people expect her to lie and truly like want her to lie. And I thought that the book just did such a good job of exploring that. And I haven't really read other books that go into that as deeply or as well as this book did. Now, on top of that, there are a lot of other things going on in this book. I could really write an essay about this book. There's so much happening here. I think it's so well crafted, truly a feat of writing in my opinion. But this does have a sort of like literary thriller backdrop to it, and I believe that's how it was marketed as well. But this book is also tackling intimate partner violence. It's tackling mother-daughter relationships. It's tackling wellness culture. It's tackling social media culture. So many things are going on in this book. And then the other thing I do really briefly want to mention before I move to the next book is the form of this book. So we are getting throughout the novel chapters that are letters, and you don't know who the letters are from in the beginning. And I thought that pacing of the letters was really smart and also adds a counterpoint to all of the lying that's going on in the novel, and I think really plays off of that nicely. So definitely recommend this book. While at its surface, I think you can just have a great time. Like if you liked The God of the Woods by Liz Moore, I think this has a similar type of like mystery plotting around it, although darker themes, I will say, definitely. But underneath, there is so much happening and so much to think about. So I would encourage you to take a little bit of extra time with this book if you like doing that and exploring everything the author is trying to do, because it's amazing. So that is Madwoman. At number 5, we have another nonfiction. This is a memoir, and it is Hunger by Roxanne Gay. Who is this done by? I don't even know. Let me look. Okay, this is done by HarperCollins. God, this memoir hit something in me and was so relatable in a lot of ways, which might sound crazy to say because there are so many ways in which this author's life is different to mine, but I still felt it deeply. So this book is arguably Roxanne Gay's most famous book, and it is mostly about her experience with an eating disorder and being in a larger body, and not just like a larger body in general, but being in like a debilitating size and what that is like for the author. And you do get to go along her experience at this specific time in her life and see how marginalized she is. We do get intersections with her race and her sexuality and lots of other parts of her identity as well, but it is mostly about the eating disorder and her weight. Those two things significantly contribute to her very low self-worth, and we get to see her making a lot of decisions in that headspace. I thought this book did such a good job of showing the contradictory nature of what it's like to have an eating disorder and some of the thoughts that run through your head constantly that really don't make sense and like aren't rational in a lot of ways, and yet they feel so real. And she's really taking us on a journey of what it means to take care of yourself and how to even learn what that's supposed to be. And I think also trying to shine a light on how hard it is to be in a significantly larger body, and that the world is just not only not made for you, but it actively makes life harder for you. And some of the misconceptions that we all have about people who are in a larger body size. And this book is just so phenomenal. I get why it's so famous. I'm so happy that my friend put this on my TBR this year for me to read. It was fantastic. And I think this came out in 2017, and it is still just as relevant today as it was back when it was written. So would highly encourage you, if you still have not read this either, and you can handle a memoir about this type of content, definitely pick it up. It is well worth your time. I think you'll learn, if you're like me, you'll learn a lot from it. My battery was full, so we're back. Sorry if the angle changed. And I don't remember what I was saying about hunger. I was right at the end, but basically so great. Loved it. Hopefully I said everything I needed to say. So let's go to number 4. And this is also a really big surprise for me this year because I picked this up on a whim, or if I'm really being honest, I picked this up while I was slightly tipsy, and my husband had just taken me after we had had dinner to the bookstore, and I had had a couple glasses of wine, and I am much more likely to pick up a book if that is the case. I saw this cover and read the blurb, sounded interesting, and like, again, that like hot pink cover, I just had to have it. And that is Beta Vulgaris. This is by Margie Sarsfield, is that it? I think that's it. And it's published by Norton, if I'm remembering correctly. And this book, blew me away in a lot of ways. It is also very dark. There's a theme going on. It is very dark. Definitely look up trigger warnings. And interestingly, now that I'm talking about these in a row, this also has a lot to do with eating disorders, but we'll come to that in a second. So in this, we're following our female protagonist. I keep saying that because I don't remember anyone's name, but our female protagonist, she is going to do a sugar beet harvest in the summer / till the beginning of fall with her boyfriend to earn some extra cash. And we get almost like 2 stories unfolding. We get her relationship with her boyfriend, which is mired in deep insecurity because of her lack of self-worth. That results in the eating disorder, in which she is absolutely in the grips of. And that is talked about constantly throughout the book. And extreme jealousy anytime he interacts with another woman. And then there's also this big like power struggle between the two of them around class and money. He comes from a very wealthy family, but has decided that he doesn't want to accept any money from them. And she is extremely poor and barely surviving. And so he sort of is like, I'm poor too, because I'm not accepting any money from my family. But really, they're not in the same position at all. It is much different to make a choice to not take money currently from your very wealthy family, but to have that safety net to fall back on, and to not have a safety net at all, and to like really have grown up in this scarcity mindset. So there's a lot of friction with both of them around that, but it's mainly internal friction on her part because she is so passive and submissive when it comes to him that she doesn't really say much of what she's thinking, and sort of like harbors this inner resentment. So that's all happening over here. With the larger plot of the book, we are following the sugar beet harvest, in which some strange things are happening. And this book does have horror elements to it. There are other people on the sugar beet harvest that are going missing, and you don't really know what's happening with that. It could just be they've decided to leave suddenly because it is a lot of really hard manual labor that's very tedious, and there are always people every year that leave. Or maybe something else is happening. That is paralleled with our protagonist's failing grip on reality, and we get these almost like hallucinations from her that tend to be around the sugar beets themselves, and she feels like they are calling to her and trying to communicate something to her, and it is all very eerie and dark, and it leads to a really wild place, and that's sort of where some of the horror comes in. This book also has some interesting form elements to it, mainly around these like bulletins that are being disseminated throughout the town that they're staying in. And they say really interesting things about the sugar beet harvest and about the beets themselves, and add a very like unique element to the book. They almost sometimes read like poetry in a way, or like a mix of poetry and those like motivational posters you used to see when you were young. And I think there's like so many layers of surrealism that really help you buy in as a reader to what the narrator might be experiencing. And this is another one where I'm like, man, this is just very impressively written. It is a debut novel. I can't believe it's a debut. I think it tackled, again, like an eating disorder very realistically, and kind of gives you that like constant nature of the thoughts. You can never escape them as the reader. And I do think that can be very hard to read for some people because it's very repetitive in a lot of ways. But yeah, I loved it. It just really worked for me. I think it was such a unique horror novel and not something that I've ever seen before. And that always gets props in my book. So that is Beta Vulgaris. We're into our top three. So number three, we have a book that I wanted to buy for so long because I thought I was gonna love it, and I did in fact love it. And that is Sift by Eliza Hattman. This is published by The Third Thing. Is that what it's called? Yes, that's what it's called. Which is a publisher that I've not read from before, and now I'm definitely intrigued to pick up more from them. This novel is so vague and so good. Now, I will preface this by saying this is a thinking novel. I think if you don't really want to question why a novel is doing certain things, this probably is not going to be for you. I love that about books. I like books that make you want to think through all the choices the author is making and why they might be making them. And this book definitely does that. So this book, oh God, how do I even describe it? It is a post-apocalyptic climate novel in the loosest sense of that phrase. We are following two unnamed-ish narrators. In the beginning, they're called the driver and the passenger. Their names change over time, but they're always nicknames. They're not their real names. And in the beginning, they are driving. We don't know where, we don't know to what, but we are getting this subtext in their conversations that the world is not what it once was, and that they are struggling to survive, and they are hoping to go to a place in which they can have the potential to live, not like settle down and have a home, but just like to keep living so they don't die. So I know that's vague. That's because the book is super vague. And I think this book is vague for a reason. So if you think about why it is vague, I think it allows us to not separate ourselves from whatever this climate disaster is. Because you don't know what's happened, you can't say like, oh, well, like, would that happen? When would that happen? Is that gonna happen in my lifetime? The world seems sort of like our world. You just know that everything's bad and it's struggling to survive. So it's climate fiction that feels like now. It feels like our world. And I think that gives the book a level of urgency that it wouldn't otherwise have, and is more confronting for the reader to experience. I also think this book does a really good job of tackling the grief that we have already experienced and will continue to experience around climate change, and how that might progress and evolve over time. And how do you form connections in a world of deep, deep scarcity, and we get like a really unique connection between these two women. It's just fascinating in so many ways. And again, like this book, like I think you do have to want to put some work into it in order to get something out of it, but really rewarding if you do, and also beautifully written. It is written in a vignette style, and there are some one-liners in this that I just absolutely loved and flagged for me to come back to later. So again, I know my synopsis is vague because the novel is vague, but hopefully I gave a good indication of whether or not you might be the reader to pick this up and enjoy it. But that is Sift by Alissa Hattman. Also, this has a beautiful cover, and you can't see it in the image obviously, but it has texture to it that goes with the pattern on the book. It is sort of just like a beautiful object in and of itself, and it is made out of sustainable materials, which I think is really like full circle with what the book is talking about. So I love that as well. So that is Sift. Next up, in number 2, we have Godshot by Chelsea Bieker. Yes, this is the second Chelsea Bieker in my top list this year. And honestly, I had to talk myself out of putting Heartbroke on here by Chelsea Bieker, which is her short story collection, which I also read this year. I could have put all of them in my best books of the year. They are so fantastic, but I went with the 2 that I went with, and Godshot I'm putting in second place. Now, I do think, interestingly, Madwoman is the more impressive craft-wise. Like, I think it was probably the harder book to write, but there's something about Godshot that just got me, and I think it is the main character, but it could also be recency bias because Godshot is the most recent one that I've read, so who knows, take it with a grain of salt. But Godshot is fantastic, let me tell you about it. We are following our teenage main protagonist. I think we actually might start following her as a preteen, and she is living in a very rural desert town in California where most people are living below the poverty line. And a lot of this very small town is a part of a local church that is really a cult, but it has the veneer of a church. And we get that evolution of over time of understanding the doctrine or like indoctrination that they're doing of these people in the church and what all is going on there. Definitely trigger warnings. It's another dark book, shockingly, but really we are getting a deep dive into our main protagonist coming of age in this type of circumstance. She has a very fractured relationship with her mother, who does end up leaving her very early on in the novel. Her mother is very conventionally beautiful, and that has sort of been the only power she's ever had in her life. And she tries to use that to advantage as much as she can. And she is also taken advantage of for that reason. So it's this real double-edged sword with her beauty, and there's some like interesting background conversations around that. We get our protagonist's relationship with a local sex hotline where she works for a portion of the book, and the other women who work there really become like a found family for her and try to take care of her as best that they can and give her hope that there are some options for her for a different type of life. And then we get the church or cult itself. And this book is very propulsive, very plotty, but really I think the characters are the heart and soul of this book. They're characters to really root for and fight for and hurt for. And then there are characters who are just vile people and sort of everything in between. She is so good at setting and place and really bring to life the environment that the characters are living in. Chelsea Bieker, I think all of her stuff is set in California. That's where she's from. And she really just does such a good job of describing those settings. This town is so hot and oppressive and living in famine and drought, and it really feels like end times, like apocalyptic, like Revelations like, and you can see how some of the people are buying into this, living in a setting like this. It has like a biblical quality to it. This book is so easy to remember for me, and I think that's also a really impressive sign with a book, at least for me, because I do struggle to remember details of books I read like months and months and months ago, but this one, so much of it has stayed with me. And this is Chelsea Bieker's debut novel, which is crazy to think about. I can really see a lot of seeds being planted that come out in Madwoman, and that is why I like reading multiple books from certain authors in a short amount of time, because it allows you to maybe like see some things that I wouldn't have otherwise seen or noticed. And this is just so amazing. Again, dark, like if you can handle the content, I definitely think more people should pick this up. It's so underrated in my opinion, and just really captures human resilience in a way that feels very harrowing and true. So if that sounds interesting to you, definitely pick up Godshot. And then we're on to my number one, which you could probably guess if you've been watching my channel this year, because there's a book that I've loved this year that I have not mentioned yet. And I do think my number one spot still has to go to Margos Got Money Troubles by Rufi Thorpe. This is published by William Morrow, and this book just really captured me this year. Now, again, this is a year where it's like, is my best book better than the other books on the list? I don't really know, but this felt like the one that I talked about the most this year. This is by far the most I have ever recommended a book in my real life, and people have actually read it and loved it. I think I've recommended it to almost like 10 people at this point, and every single person has enjoyed it. And that is rare for me to get to experience, and I've loved that. So this book, if you don't already know, is about Margot, the titular Margot. And in the very beginning of the novel, happens off page, you don't see this, but she has had an affair with one of her professors at her community college that she's attending and becomes pregnant. And Margot, being a young adult, is very much in that phase of life where she is trying to decide her own moral compass and what is right from wrong, and is both like naive and sincere about this at the same time. And she decides that the right thing to do is to have the baby. And so she makes that decision, despite almost everyone in her life telling her that that's not a good idea. And we get a lot of opinions from all of the fringe characters of this novel, of which there are many. Margot is just such a singular force as a character. She is so funny and earnest and hardworking and naive, sometimes selfish. She's just a really complicated character to follow. This book, I think, shines for me in two ways. I think it really shines in the characters. There are so many characters that are so amazingly rendered, have really strong emotional arcs throughout the novel, and it is really tackling a lot of systemic issues that I think, at least in the US, we're currently grappling with. One of those being sex work. And in this specific instance, it's sort of like cam girl work. So our main protagonist, Margot, decides that in order to financially support her baby, she needs to get a job in which she can work from home or like a shorter amount of hours, so she doesn't have to pay for childcare or pay for a lot of childcare. So she decides that she should start an OnlyFans. She decides this at the mention of OnlyFans from her father. Now that might sound weird, but it isn't brought up that her father suggests that she do this. Her father is talking about someone else that he knows that have started an OnlyFans, because her father is an ex-pro wrestler. He is retired. And I think there's like another wrestler that he knows that is also retired, and that's the way that they make money now. And there's this really interesting juxtaposition of her and her father both using their bodies for their lines of work. And I thought that conversation was fascinating and so well done. There's some commentary on social services in the US. There's commentary on substance abuse and the opioid crisis in the US. There's commentary on fundamentalist Christianity in the US. And it really is just this amalgamation of all these pressures and systems that are pushing down on our main character while you're trying to create your own belief system, which as a young adult is what everyone's trying to do, to separate out from some of the systems that just have been in place and they're sort of expected to believe and you adopt by being raised in them, but you start to confront some of those things and make your own decisions and have different values than the people around you. It really just like summed up this phase of life in such a fun, funny, heartfelt, challenging way, and I loved it. I just loved it. Not to mention, the audiobook of this is so good. It is read by Elle Fanning, and she does a fantastic job narrating Margot. She is going to play Margot in the Apple TV series that is coming out later this year, which I cannot wait for. And that absolutely colored and impacted my experience of the book. Her narration just really brought that character to life. And then the other thing I'll mention about this that it sort of mentions in the book is that it does switch between first and third person depending on how uncomfortable Margot is sharing the things that she's talking about. So when she is more comfortable, she's in first person. When she's talking about something that is really challenging or traumatic, she switches to third person. And she, as the narrator, sort of like breaks the fourth wall to tell you that. And this book does really straddle the line of like commercial and literary for me. It's kind of somewhere in the middle. And I think that's why it's been such an accessible book for me to recommend. So if you're someone who likes that like mix of things, this might be a really great pick for you. So that is Margot's Got Money Troubles, and that is my top 12 books of 2025. Please let me know if you've read any of these books, and if so, what you thought about them, or if you're interested in reading any of these books, and if so, which you're gonna pick up. But more importantly, let me know what you loved this year. I'm always dying to get some more recommendations on my list, and now you know some of the books that I loved. Maybe you might be able to recommend some that you think I would enjoy based on my taste. So hopefully you like this video. Thank you for listening to me chat today about my favorite books, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye.